Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, published in 1890, a Lantern Library retelling. The story begins in the warm, fragrant hush of Basil Hallward's studio. Light filters through tall windows, catching on dust motes and the rich colors of the canvases stacked against the walls. But one painting dominates the room, a life-size portrait of an astonishingly handsome young man. Basil stands before it, brush in hand, both proud and strangely anxious. Lord Henry Wotton lounges nearby, smoking lazily, watching the painter with a mixture of boredom and amusement. Henry is the sort of man who fills silence with clever, dangerous ideas, and today he's full of them. Basil tries to distract him, but Henry's curiosity sharpens the moment he hears the name Dorian Gray. Basil admits, reluctantly, that Dorian has become the greatest inspiration of his life. He speaks of him with such admiration that even Henry raises an eyebrow. Basil insists that he can't exhibit the portrait publicly because he's put too much of himself, too much of his worship, into the work. Before Henry can pry further, the studio door opens. Dorian Gray steps inside. He's strikingly beautiful, youthful, innocent, with a natural grace that makes the air seem to shift around him. Henry watches him with fascinated interest, sensing something malleable and precious in him. Basil, on the other hand, stiffens nervously, trying to steer the conversation toward safer ground. But Henry is already engaging Dorian, drawing him in with casual but piercing remarks about youth, beauty, and the briefness of life. His words slip into Dorian's mind like smoke. Soft, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. Dorian listens, at first amused, then unsettled. Henry speaks as if youth is the only thing worth having, and that someday Dorian will look back on this moment with unbearable regret. The idea hits Dorian with surprising force. He had never considered that his beauty could fade, that time would one day reshape him. Then Basil unveils the completed portrait. Dorian stares at it, his breath catching. It's perfect, so perfect it almost hurts him to look at it. The boy in the painting is frozen in time, untouched by worry or age. And suddenly, with a shock of jealousy, Dorian realizes the truth. The portrait will stay young forever, while he will not. The thought swells inside him until he blurts out a desperate, half-playful wish that he might remain forever as he is now, and that the portrait should bear the burden of age instead. His voice trembles with intensity. Basil tries to laugh it away. Henry simply smiles as if he's been waiting to hear those words. The wish hangs between them, quiet and ominous. And though none of them knows it yet, something in the world has shifted. In the days that follow, Lord Henry's influence settles over Dorian like a spell. Henry visits him often, speaking in that smooth, lilting voice about desire, pleasure, and the freedom found in ignoring society's rigid rules. He insists that guilt is a pointless invention, that life is far too short for restraint, and that beauty, especially Dorian's beauty, is a gift meant to be indulged, not wasted. Dorian listens eagerly. Something inside him seems to wake under Henry's words, something restless and hungry. Basil notices the change almost immediately. He watches Dorian laugh more easily, challenge ideas he once accepted, and show flashes of pride that were never there before. Basil confronts Henry privately, insisting he's filling Dorian's head with destructive nonsense. Henry only laughs. He argues that Dorian is destined for greatness, that he's merely helping the boy realize who he truly is. When Basil warns Dorian himself, Dorian waves it off with a smile. He says Henry's views are exciting, refreshing, liberating. Basil's warnings sound old-fashioned in comparison. And beneath it all, the portrait remains fresh and unchanged, a silent reminder of the boy Basil first met. Henry's philosophy grows roots inside Dorian's mind. It makes him see the world differently, full of sensual colors, forbidden experiences, and temptations he'd never imagined. And though he doesn't fully realize it yet, Dorian has begun walking a new path, one guided not by conscience, but by curiosity and desire. Basil watches anxiously as Dorian drifts further toward Henry's orbit. But Dorian is young, impressionable, eager to taste life in all its extremes. Henry's influence is like a bright flame, and Dorian is already leaning too close. The innocence in Basil's beloved portrait has not yet shifted, but the change has begun inside the real Dorian Gray. Dorian's life drifts into a new rhythm, days spent absorbing Lord Henry's dazzling conversations, nights wandering the city in search of fresh sensations. It's during one of these evenings that he finds himself in a cramped, shabby theatre tucked away in a poor quarter of London. The place is unimpressive, peeling paint, rattling seats, an audience of tired workers and loud regulars. But the moment Sybil Vane steps onto the stage, the world around Dorian transforms. She is luminous. Her voice carries a tenderness that feels almost unearthly. She plays Juliet with such innocence, such heartbreaking purity, that Dorian is mesmerized. He returns the next night, and the next. Soon he's backstage meeting her, fumbling awkwardly through his admiration. Sybil blushes at his compliments, calling him her Prince Charming with shy devotion. She's young, 17, perhaps 18. Delicate, soft-spoken, glowing with the sort of hope Dorian finds irresistible. Her mother watches carefully, eager for the attention of a wealthy gentleman, but Sybil's brother James, preparing to leave for Australia, bristles with suspicion. Something about Dorian troubles him, though he doesn't know why. Their romance blooms quickly, sweet, innocent, idealized. Dorian is captivated not only by Sybil herself, but by the version of love she represents, romantic, poetic, untouched by the cynicism Henry so often preaches. With her, Dorian feels almost pure again, as if he's stepped into one of the grand stories she performs on stage. He writes to Henry and Basil in excitement, insisting they must see her perform. He speaks of her talent as if it has no equal. "She is art come alive," he says. "She is the greatest actress in London." Henry listens with an amused smile, curious to witness this sudden devotion. Basil is quietly hopeful. Perhaps love will anchor Dorian, soften Henry's influence, bring him back toward innocence. But beneath Dorian's enthusiasm lies a subtle mistake. He's fallen in love not with Sybil the girl, but with Sybil the vision, the shimmering dream who steps onto the stage bathed in candlelight. The real Sybil, the tender human heart behind the performance, is still a mystery to him. And when dreams collide with reality, the consequences can be tragic. The night arrives. Dorian brings Basil and Lord Henry to the tiny theatre, eager to share Sybil's brilliance. Henry lounges with mild curiosity, Basil with quiet hope, and Dorian with nervous excitement. But the moment Sybil steps onto the stage, something is wrong. Her voice lacks its usual magic. Her movements feel stiff, uncertain. The lines of Shakespeare fall flat, hollow, stripped of the emotion that once enchanted Dorian. The audience grows restless. Henry raises an eyebrow. Basil shifts uncomfortably. Dorian sits frozen, disbelief turning slowly into embarrassment, then anger. After the curtain falls, he storms backstage to find Sybil radiant with happiness, completely unaware of her failure. She throws her arms around him, explaining that she can no longer pretend love on stage now that she knows what real love feels like. Acting suddenly feels false to her, artificial, empty. But Dorian hears none of the innocence in her confession. To him, she has ruined the thing he worshipped most, her artistry. Without that, the idealized dream he built around her collapses. He accuses her of destroying his love, says she has made herself ordinary, and ends their engagement with cold, cutting words. Sybil's face crumples. She sinks to her knees, begging him to understand, but Dorian turns away and leaves her alone in the dim backstage corridor. He walks home with bitterness hardening in him, repeating Henry's teachings in his mind. Life is art, beauty is everything, and love must serve pleasure, not burden it. But when he enters his home and glances at the portrait, he freezes. There's a new hardness around its mouth, a subtle twist of cruelty that wasn't there before. He leans closer, heart pounding. The painted Dorian looks slightly less innocent, as if mirroring the coldness he showed Sybil only hours before. The change is tiny, almost imagined, but it's enough. For the first time, Dorian feels a flicker of unease, an awareness that his wish in Basil's studio may not have been just a childish outburst. The portrait has begun its terrible work. Dorian barely sleeps. The altered expression on the portrait haunts him, too precise, too real to be a trick of the light. By morning, he's pacing the room, torn between guilt and denial. Perhaps he imagined it. Perhaps the shadows played with his mind. Yet something inside him already knows the truth. The portrait has begun to bear the marks of his actions. Lord Henry arrives late in the morning, speaking in his usual calm, amused way. He tells Dorian there's news. Serious news. Sybil Vane is dead. The world seems to tilt. Dorian stares at him, struggling to process the words. Henry explains gently. Sybil collapsed outside the theater the previous night, a vial of chemicals found nearby. A tragic accident, the papers say. But Henry, in his elegant, unsettling way, insists that Sybil's death is not a burden, but a kind of artistic finale. Her life ended like a perfect play, he murmurs. She gave you something rare, a moment of pure, dramatic beauty. Dorian's first reaction is shock, then grief, then, disturbingly, something like relief. Henry's perspective wraps around his thoughts, smothering guilt, turning the tragedy into something romantic and distant. By evening, Dorian finds himself almost serene. He goes upstairs and looks again at the portrait. The change is clearer now, the cruel twist in the mouth, the faint hardness around the eyes. The painting has absorbed the stain of his behavior, while he himself remains untouched, unchanged, beautiful. For the first time, Dorian feels the full weight of his wish. The portrait has become the vessel for his soul. It will carry his sins, his age, his ugliness. He touches his own flawless face and shivers. He realizes he can live as he pleases, free from consequence, free from time. The portrait will suffer in his place. Dorian covers the painting carefully, almost tenderly, as if protecting a secret. Before he goes to bed, he rereads Henry's letter about Sybil's death. Ornate, soothing, full of philosophical comfort, and as he folds it away, he feels something inside him shift further from innocence. Sybil is gone, and Dorian Gray has begun his real journey. Dorian's life changes after Sybil's death, quietly at first, then dramatically. He throws himself into society, dazzling London with his charm, his beauty, his apparent purity. People adore him. Artists seek to paint him. Hosts brag about securing his presence at their dinners. But beneath that flawless exterior, Dorian's hunger for new experiences grows sharper. Lord Henry becomes his constant mentor, feeding him ideas as intoxicating as wine. He gives Dorian a strange, beautifully bound yellow book, an obscure novel filled with tales of decadence, obsession, and moral decline. Dorian reads it once, then again, then so many times he can recite whole passages from memory. Its poisonous elegance becomes a guidebook for his own life. He begins collecting rare perfumes, intricate jewels, tapestries, and musical instruments. He explores hidden corners of London where pleasure and danger intertwine. He studies beauty with the intensity of a scholar, but he also seeks darker pursuits. Rumors swirl of gambling dens, secret gatherings, and friendships destroyed by his influence. His face remains angelic, But the portrait, hidden beneath a heavy cloth in a locked attic room, so grows steadily worse. Every unkind word, every betrayal, every secret indulgence leaves its mark. Not on him, but on the painted Dorian. The once youthful face becomes twisted, swollen with vice, the eyes sunken and cruel. Sometimes he forces himself to look at it, and the sight fills him with both revulsion and fascination. He buys screens and locks for the room. No one is allowed inside. Even the servants avoid the place, sensing an unease that seems to seep beneath the door. Meanwhile, society begins to whisper about him. Strange stories appear, close friendships ending abruptly, young men falling into disgrace after spending too much time at his side. Some try to defend him, insisting he's too gentle, too refined to be guilty of anything so serious. Others grow uneasy, remembering small moments when his charm slipped and something colder showed beneath. Still, Dorian moves through London's highest circles unscathed. His youth is his shield, his beauty a perfect disguise. He doesn't age a day. Years pass like water. Basil watches from a painful distance, confused and troubled by the change in him. The boy he once loved like a muse is becoming someone else. Someone Henry seems to understand, but Basil barely recognizes. Yet nothing stops Dorian's descent. The portrait alone tells the truth of his life. Trapped in the attic with its growing ugliness, its sick, smirking reflection of his soul. Dorian visits it less often. Not because he's forgotten it, but because looking at it means facing the reality of what he has become. A reality only the portrait is forced to bear. It's late autumn when Basil Hallward appears at Dorian's doorstep, looking exhausted and troubled. He spent the evening at a dinner party where the conversation kept circling back to one topic: Dorian Gray. The rumors have grown louder, harsher, impossible to ignore. Basil can no longer persuade himself that they're lies. Dorian invites him in with a warm smile, acting as if nothing in the world weighs on his conscience. But Basil, usually gentle and hesitant, is firm tonight. He speaks of reputations ruined, friendships shattered, and young men who vanished from society after falling under Dorian's influence. At first, Dorian laughs it off, but Basil's pain is too genuine to ignore. "Dorian," he says softly, "is any of it true?" For a moment, Dorian hesitates. Something cold flickers in his eyes. Then, with a strange calmness, he says, "Come upstairs. I'll show you the real answer." He leads Basil to the attic room, the one place no visitor has ever entered. The key trembles slightly in the lock. The smell inside is stale, heavy with neglect. Dorian walks to the covered portrait and, without ceremony, pulls the cloth away. Basil gasps. What hangs before him is not the portrait he painted. The face is disfigured, bloated with cruelty, the eyes sharp and mocking, the mouth twisted into a permanent sneer, the hands seem stained, as though with something dark and dried. The whole image has decayed into a grotesque reflection of sin. Basil staggers back, horrified. He asks what it means, how such a thing is possible. Dorian explains, almost with pride, that the portrait bears the burden of his life while he remains unchanged. Basil, stricken, begs him to pray, to repent, to destroy whatever evil has hold of him. But something inside Dorian snaps. All the resentment he's carried, the feeling of being judged, constrained, measured, boils over. Basil, the one man whose admiration once felt like salvation, now seems like an accuser, a threat. In a sudden, frantic burst, Dorian grabs the knife lying nearby. A tool once used to cut canvas, now turned to something darker. The moment is quick, impulsive, fueled by weeks of anxiety and years of corruption. Basil collapses silently. The attic returns to stillness, broken only by Dorian's ragged breath. For a long time he stands over the body, staring as if it might rise again. But Basil remains still, and the portrait Oh, the portrait now bears a fresh streak of blood at the hands. Dorian covers the painting and calls for a discreet contact of his. A man with scientific skill and no moral questions. Together, under the cover of night, they make Basil vanish from the world. By dawn, Dorian's face is as untouched as ever, but something in him has shifted irreversibly. The corruption is no longer a whisper, it is his only companion. After Basil's disappearance, Dorian tries to carry on as if nothing has changed. He attends dinners, visits Henry, strolls through art galleries with polite interest, but his calm is a thin veneer. He avoids the attic entirely now, not out of forgetfulness, but fear of what new horrors the portrait might reveal. The man who helped him hide the body, a chemist with a ruined reputation, tries to distance himself. But Dorian's influence is strong, and his threats stronger. The man is dragged deeper into Dorian's dark orbit until he can no longer bear the weight of guilt. His eventual fate becomes another whispered scandal attached to Dorian's name. Yet Dorian remains untouchable. Still, rumors grow. People lower their voices when he passes. Some refuse to meet his eyes, but others, morbidly curious, draw even closer. Society has an appetite for beautiful monsters. One cold evening, while wandering the docks in search of distraction, Dorian feels someone watching him. A figure emerges from the shadows. A rough-looking man with a weathered face and haunted eyes. James Vane. He grips Dorian by the arm, snarling that he's been searching for him for years. "You ruined my sister," he growls. "You left her with nothing but despair." Dorian panics. He insists there must be some mistake, but James is relentless. He drags Dorian toward the darkness, ready to take revenge the way he's always imagined. Then, by chance, a lantern swings overhead, casting its light across Dorian's face. James freezes. The man before him looks far too young, no older than 20 to have destroyed Sybil so many years ago. James hesitates. Confusion breaking through fury, Dorian seizes the moment, insisting he's never even heard of Sybil Vane. The lie is smooth, perfect, impossible to disprove in the dim, foggy night. James releases him. Shaken, Dorian walks away quickly, forcing himself not to run. But the encounter shakes something loose. The safety his eternal youth once promised now feels like a trap, an illusion that can shatter at any moment. For the first time in years, Dorian is truly afraid. And James Vane is not finished with him yet. In the days after the confrontation at the docks, Dorian grows uneasy. He senses eyes following him through crowded streets. Every footstep behind him feels like a threat. At night, he dreams of Sybil, her pale face turned toward him with silent accusation, and James, emerging from the fog with murder in his eyes. Lord Henry dismisses his fears with amused indifference. "My dear boy," he says, "you're far too charming to inspire such melodrama." But Dorian can't shake the feeling that his luck is thinning. Eternal youth hides him from suspicion, but it cannot stop a determined avenger. He retreats to the countryside, hoping distance will quiet his mind. He joins a hunting party on a large estate, an attempt at distraction, at returning to the light of social activity. Yet even here, in the crisp open air, he feels watched. Late one afternoon, as the group moves through a patch of woodland, a sudden shout rings out. A keeper has spotted movement. A shot goes off. Then another. A terrible cry follows. The men rush into the undergrowth. A body lies sprawled among the roots. Dorian arrives moments later and sees the pale, unmistakable face. James Vane. The sight nearly knocks the breath from him. The estate's owner insists it was an accident, a tragic mistake. But Dorian knows better. The hunter had seen a figure hiding among the trees earlier that day. Someone stalking the party. Someone stalking him. James had followed him here, and now James is dead. Dorian returns to London shaken but relieved. The danger that hovered over him for years is suddenly gone. The shadow in the fog, the threat from the past, it's all ended. He is free again. But something in him has changed. The weight of Basil's death, Sybil's memory, James's pursuit. They press against him like stones. He begins to wonder if Lord Henry's philosophy, his celebration of indulgence, his dismissal of conscience, has led him somewhere he can no longer endure. For the first time in many years, Dorian imagines a different life, a cleaner life, a life not built on destruction. He tells himself he can change, that he will change. But the portrait waits upstairs, unseen for weeks, bearing the truth he refuses to face. Back in London, Dorian avoids the attic as if the room itself were cursed. Days pass, then weeks. He tries small acts of kindness, tests himself with good intentions. A young village girl he once pursued. He lets her go, refusing to ruin her innocence. He tells himself it is the first step toward redemption. He almost believes it. But one night, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, he climbs the stairs to the locked attic. His footsteps echo in the silence. His hand trembles as he turns the key. The room smells of dust and old secrets. He pulls the cloth from the portrait. His breath catches. The face that greets him is more monstrous than ever. Bloated, cracked, its eyes gleaming with cruel triumph. But something else has changed, an expression not of corruption, but of hypocrisy. A sneer that mocks his feeble attempts at goodness. His small act of mercy hasn't purified him. It has only revealed another layer of self-deception. He staggers backward. The truth crushes him. He can't undo what he's done. He can't escape who he's become. The portrait is no longer just a record of his sins. It is a trap, binding him to the very things he tried to forget. A wild thought takes hold. If the portrait is the source of his torment, if it holds the truth of his life, then destroying it might free him, might cleanse him, might finally bring peace. He grabs the same knife he used on Basil. The blade trembles in his hand as he faces the twisted reflection of his soul. "Why should it hold my conscience?" he whispers. "Why should it live when I am condemned to this?" With a desperate cry, he plunges the knife into the canvas. A scream echoes through the house, not from the portrait, but from Dorian himself. Servants rush upstairs. They break down the door to find the portrait restored, young, flawless, radiant, exactly as Basil painted it years ago. On the floor lies a withered, grotesque old man, twisted by years of hidden corruption. His face is unrecognizable, except for the rings on his fingers. It is Dorian Gray. The price of eternal youth has finally come due. The portrait remains untouched, silent, beautiful, innocent. The soul it once carried is gone.